It's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. Rand Paul's waste report is out, and I'm going to be honest with you, some of this stuff is really weird. And I'm not even sure that I should read some of this, because they're doing some really strange things to animals. You know what Rand Paul does, right? So every year he comes out with his, I think he calls it the Festivus report. And basically what it is he's reporting on the waste in our government. And so, of course, the big ticket items include $892 billion paid in interest on our government's credit card, $90 billion the government has spent on ineffective U.S. Navy combat ships. That's also a problem. There's the $15.5 billion, they say, promoting electric vehicles Americans don't want. And, yeah, that's a free market thing. The $10 billion the federal government spent on maintaining, leasing, and furnishing office buildings that have become virtual ghost towns in the post-COVID era when most government employees work from home. Yeah, when I say the electric vehicles the American people don't want and the $15.5 billion promoting said vehicles, that's a free, to me, it's a free market thing. Either the American people want electric vehicles or they don't. But it shouldn't be up to our government to try to influence or manipulate the free market and force electric vehicles on the American people. That impacts jobs with the auto manufacturers. You know, that impacts unions and everything else. And so, to me, that is absolutely wasteful spending. But here's a few other things. Apparently, in the new report, Rand Paul says that he focused on a number of different things. $10,000 grant the National Endowment for the Arts gave the Bearded Ladies Cabaret for a climate change-themed ice skating performance titled Beards on Ice. Yep. Spending $10,000 on drag ice skating may feel like a drop in the bucket, but every dollar counts when our country is facing serious issues and massive debt, Rand Paul says, and I agree. Supporters will argue it brings climate awareness to the masses. Really? Beards on Ice? The Bearded Ladies Cabaret is really bringing climate awareness to the masses? I don't think so. Although I'd be willing to bet that the Bearded Ladies Cabaret for a climate change themed ice skating performance, Beards on Ice, probably had more eyes on it than your typical hour on MSNBC. I'm just saying. The report also said the U.S. Agency for International Development allocated $20 million in taxpayer money on a Sesame Street spinoff called Alam Simsim in Iraq to promote inclusion and mutual respect. So they basically came up with an Iraqi version of Sesame Street, and we paid $20 million for that. All right, this is where it's going to get a little weird. It's going to get a little funky here. But it's the news, and I've got to talk about it, and I might have topic regret on this, but here goes. Senator Rand Paul, who has a history of opposing unnecessary experimentation using animals, highlighted one study funded by the Department of Defense under the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency for $10 million. According to the watchdog White Coast Waste Project, the researchers at the University of Pittsburgh sliced open the backs of male cats to expose their spinal cords and then inserted electrodes to fire off electric shocks while the incision was still open. Why did they do this? To cause the cats, the male cats, to have an erection. Yep, I regret this. The report claims the cats were sometimes shocked for up to 20 minutes at a time before the cats had their spinal cords severed to paralyze their lower bodies. Now, I just want to know why. Like, the thing that I don't like about this is, why exactly is it? Are they trying to do this to cats? Like, what are they trying to figure out? I don't know. I know it's horrible. I don't like doing this either, but this is news, and you've got to know what your money is being spent on, what your hard-earned taxpayer dollars are being spent on. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't like it either. You think that's bad? Listen to this. Another experiment highlighted in the report involved shocking cats' spinal cords to force them to defecate marbles that were inserted into their rectums. Again, I don't know what the research is. I don't know what they're trying to prove. I don't know what they're trying to find out. That's part of the... Because you know what? If they said, well, yeah, the reason they're doing this is because XYZ. They're trying to figure out XYZ. I'd still hate it, but at least I would understand it. Rand Paul says your hard-earned money, nearly $11 million of it, was spent on experiments that would be more at home in a dystopian novel than the real world. It's a grim reminder that, when left unchecked, government spending can drift into realms that defy common sense. Here's another one. I don't know if I should do this, but I'm already down this road. Rand Paul was also critical of the National Institutes of Health spending $1,513,299 since 2019 on experiments where kittens are strapped to a hydraulic table that tilts and spins in all directions in an effort to induce severe motion sickness. I mean, this is horrible. During these experiments, the report says some kittens have parts of their brains removed while they are still alive, leaving them devoid of cognitive function. And again, I wish, you know what, Red Eye Radio has a massive audience. Is there anybody out there that can explain to me why exactly it is that these kind of experiments are important? I mean, here's the deal. Again, if they just said, what are you trying to prove? What are you trying to come up with? I might be like, oh, okay. At least I would understand it. All right, that's it. I'm done. That's awful. And I just so we're clear, I'm not a big cat fan, but that is horrific. And there's, of course, all of the other, the whole point of Rand Paul's report, the Festivus report, is to focus on wasted government spending. I mean, I could go down the road of the $1 billion that we're giving Angola, all that money that we've given Ukraine. I think that is a perfectly legit debate to have. Some people would disagree with me on that, but I think we've given far, far too much money to Ukraine. It's become a big black hole of funding. We could talk about all the money that we've wasted on illegal aliens and allowing them into our country. We're giving them money. We're giving them food, letting them stay in hotels. I mean, all of this is good money thrown after bad policy. And that's what the Biden administration has done. And that's part of what the American people, this is why the American people are so frustrated. And here's the deal. I know this stuff also happens under Donald Trump, but at least Trump has now come up with Doge, courtesy of Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. It's not an official government agency, if you will, but they'll be advising Donald Trump and his cabinet and his administration where money can be saved. We'll have to see how that works. But yeah, there's a lot of places. Let's be honest. There's a lot of places to save money. Now, Matt Gaetz, let me just get through this real quick. Matt Gaetz, I did this, talked about this earlier, had a lot of reaction to it. A lot of new people are listening in, so I want to get through this real quick. Because I think that it is important to give all sides of this discussion. Matt Gaetz, the House Ethics report on him was released yesterday. The long-awaited House Ethics report came out accusing former Congressman Matt Gaetz of a lot, as reported by Fox News.
A blistering report by the House Ethics Committee with salacious details. It accuses the former Republican Florida representative of statutory rape, paying for sex twice with a 17-year-old girl, and paying other women for sex and drugs on at least 20 occasions. The report also declared that Gaetz lied to the State Department about trying to get an expedited passport for one of the women with whom he had sex. His staffers told the State Department she was a constituent. She was not.
All right, so this is from Fox, citing text messages, travel receipts, online payments, and testimony. The bipartisan committee paints a picture of a lifestyle in which Matt Gaetz and others connected with younger women for drug-fueled parties, events, or trips, with the expectation the women would be paid for their participation. So they looked at all of these transactions, and there were all these payments, but they were logged for things like car repair and food and school payments and these kinds of things. And so I'm just here to tell you that it looks to me like he's a important guy, he's living large, and he's got money to burn. And so he's got girlfriends, ex-girlfriends, he's got hookups and that kind of a thing, but he's very generous. I mean, maybe he's playing the part or even is some sort of a sugar daddy kind of a thing. But nowhere in this report do they prove that Matt Gaetz was paying for sex. He posted this: giving funds to someone you are dating that they didn't ask for and that isn't charged for sex is now considered prostitution, he asks in one post yesterday. He says, there is a reason they did this to me in a Christmas Eve report and not in a courtroom of any kind where, he says, I could present evidence and challenge witnesses. See, I think news management is a big part of this, because when you release a report on Christmas Eve, then I think that they know that this report is easily defeatable. And they didn't prove anything. This is from the Associated Press. The committee found that between 2017 and 2020, Matt Gaetz paid tens of thousands of dollars to women. And this is a quote. I want you to listen very closely. Likely in connection with sexual activity and or drug use. He paid the women using online services like PayPal, Venmo, and Cash App, and so forth, also with cash or checks, the committee said. Okay. Number one, they say that the payments, the tens of thousands of dollars to women, were likely in connection with sexual activity. Likely? If you're going to ruin a man's political career, if you're going to disparage his character, then you better go with a word stronger than likely. In other words, it doesn't sound like they have anything concrete here. There's a reason why the DOJ didn't bring forth any charges. They dropped it. And then this bipartisan ethics committee decided to pick it up. Now, realize you know this because you listen to Red Eye Radio. You know that Matt Gaetz is very much disliked in Washington, D.C. by both Republicans and Democrats, and he is one of the leaders when it comes to going after and calling out the DOJ and Merrick Garland. So is it a witch hunt? Or was this a legit investigation? The committee said it found evidence that Gaetz understood the, quote, transactional nature of his relationships with the women. The report claims to one text exchange in which Gaetz balked at a woman's request that he send her money, claiming that she only gave him a drive-by. Now, I don't know the context of that text. But they're trying to accuse Gaetz of basically, making it rain, money, making it rain, that kind of a thing, with a bunch of girlfriends, and he's hooking up with all these girls, and he's very generous with the girls. It doesn't mean that he is paying them X to get Y, if you know what I mean. But part of the question is, why is it that the DOJ didn't bring forth any charges? I've got details on that and a whole lot more straight ahead, because basically the same witnesses that the DOJ said had zero credibility are the same witnesses that this entire report is based on. Details straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
The U.S. weather trends in December.
We have seen below normal temperatures across the eastern half of the country in roughly the first 3 weeks of December, but significantly above normal temperatures from the Pacific coast to the high plains.
Yet USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says a shift in that weather pattern takes place this week.
Still a couple more days of cold air lurking across the Midwest and the East, but we will eventually transition to a warmer pattern in those cold areas. And so by the time we get to the new year, we are looking at above normal temperatures just about coast to coast across the country.
Which means a quiet pattern of precipitation in some locales, although the Pacific Northwest should remain active from a rain and snowfall perspective. Christmas Day morning is expected to have only 1/4 of the country covered in snow, compared to a 37% mean annually, and last year's all-time low of 18%. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE. Going over some of these allegations that have been made in this House Ethics report against Matt Gaetz. And, part of my point on all of this is I'm not sticking up for Matt Gaetz. I mean, I don't know the guy from Adam. I don't know what he did, what he didn't do. I know what the accusations are, and I know that he denies the allegations. I will tell you that I'm not impressed with a bipartisan report. I don't care how much they try to sell it as bipartisan. I know that Matt Gaetz has made enemies on both sides of the aisle. But some of these women, interviewed by the bipartisan committee, said that there was a general expectation of sex, the report said. One woman who received more than $5,000 from Matt Gaetz between 2018 and 2019 said that 99% of the time that when she hung out with Gaetz, there was sex involved. But again, I have to go back to say that nowhere in this report does it say that I will give you X if you do Y. Nowhere is there any conversation about any, charging for stuff. And by the way, they also point out that Gaetz was in a long-term relationship with one of the women that he paid. So they say some of the payments may have been of a legitimate nature. But why didn't the DOJ bring any charges? Details next.
Listening to Red Eye Radio. Season's greetings from the Uniden America Studios.
Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric, and welcome back to Red Eye Radio, and Merry Christmas to you here on Christmas Eve morning. And talking about some of these allegations against former Congressman Matt Gaetz. One of the allegations is that he slept with an underage girl. Now, apparently she didn't offer up that she was only 17 at the time. He didn't ask, it would appear. She says that she was on ecstasy also at the time, but she swears that the intimacy took place. Again, the story goes there's no evidence that Gaetz knew she was a minor when he had sex with her. The committee said the woman told the committee she did not tell Gaetz that she was under 18 at the time. He didn't ask her how old she was. Rather, the committee said Gaetz learned she was a minor more than a month after this particular party. He says, though, that apparently they say that he stayed in touch with her after that and met up with her for, and this is in air quotes, this is in quotes, and I'm not sure what it means, but that he met up with her for commercial sex again less than 6 months after she turned 18, according to the committee. I mean, it sounds like they're accusing him of prostitution. But one question does remain. If all of this happened, why in the world didn't the DOJ press any charges? Remember, this is Biden's DOJ, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General. They chose not to press any charges against one of their fiercest critics. And so the question being asked is why? It's because the witnesses had no credibility. This is from Molly Hemingway at The Federalist. And by the way, if you watch some of the reports that are out there on this with Matt Gaetz, they'll say, well, Matt Gaetz denies all of the allegations. Matt Gaetz denies the report's allegations and so forth. But they don't go into any detail. They'll spend this is why talk radio and podcasts are so important, because you watch, news and CBS News, the network and whatever, and they'll have a big 2 minute, 30-second report on the allegations. And then there's one throwaway line where they'll say Gaetz denies the allegations, right? But there's no time to go into all of the details. But I do have time, and I'm going to tell you that the witnesses that the DOJ said had zero credibility are the same exact witnesses that the Ethics Committee used for the basis of this report. Again, from Molly Hemingway. The report comes years after DOJ dropped its investigation into the same claims on the grounds that the two central witnesses had serious credibility issues. Yet these are the same two central witnesses the House Ethics Committee has relied on for its critical report of Matt Gaetz. So what does that tell you? I said earlier, there's a lot of people that are saying that this was a witch hunt that actually had no real basis or grounds for an investigation based on the credibility of the witnesses. The two witnesses, she says, have massive credibility problems. The claims arose after a guy named Joel Greenberg. They say he is one of the most corrupt Florida politicians of all time. According to Florida reporter Mark Caputo, who is now with the anti-Trump media outlet The Bulwark. But this guy, Joel Greenberg, dude sounds like a dirtbag based on what I'm seeing here. Among many things, the former Seminole County tax collector admitted to as part of a wide-ranging case for which he is currently serving 11 years in prison. You know what he did? He falsely accused local political opponent Brian Butte of having sex with a minor, similar to the outlandish claim he made against Matt Gaetz. Greenberg also reportedly later attempted to frame his own attorney with pornographic images of children. One New York Times write-up of Greenberg was headlined, like the Tiger King got elected tax collector. Can you imagine that? This guy tried to frame his own attorney with pornographic images of children. That New York Times write-up of this guy, Joel Greenberg, headlined, "Like the Tiger King got elected tax collector," really should tell you all you need to know about his credibility. But the House Ethics Committee apparently believed that he had enough credibility to go after Matt Gaetz. According to the Washington Post, Greenberg admitted to fabricating allegations against a school teacher who was running against him to be a tax collector. He admitted to lying about his political opponent. Greenberg had sent letters to the school falsely claiming the teacher had an inappropriate sexual relationship with a student, a similar allegation to the Gaetz case. U.S. District Judge Gregory Presnell, appointed by President Bill Clinton, said Greenberg's actions against that innocent victim were downright evil. So do you see this Joel Greenberg? He has a pattern of behavior. If he's got a political enemy, or if he's got people that he wants out of the way, he'll accuse them of things. He'll try to frame them in abhorrent ways. You'll notice a pattern. Molly Hemingway goes on to write that this guy Greenberg asked Matt Gaetz to help him get a pardon. Gaetz refused, so Greenberg went after him with all of these allegations. And so Molly Hemingway is reporting all of this, and most of the other media is not reporting on all of this, that these allegations from the House Ethics Committee, they're based on witness testimony where these witnesses have zero credibility. So Molly Hemingway was on Fox News, and she was talking about all this.
They have prosecuted political opponents. They ran the Russia collusion hoax. And too many people in Washington, D.C. did not stand up against what was happening there. And many Americans are upset about it. Matt Gaetz is one of the most effective people at fighting that Russia collusion hoax and other information operations, whether it was the Brett Kavanaugh information operation, the Donald Trump Russia collusion hoax information operation, or the one that is referenced here, which is something that the FBI and Department of Justice, which hate Matt Gaetz, looked into and cleared him of any wrongdoing. The issue is corruption. It's the Department of Justice's corruption. And people are sick and tired of people in Washington, D.C. doing nothing as these people tried to destroy the country and getting upset at someone who actually might root out the corruption there. We don't have a Department of Justice. We have a Department of Injustice.
Listen, I don't know. I'm going to say it again. I'm not defending Matt Gaetz. I don't know what he did, and as I said earlier, you folks don't either. We know what Gaetz says. We know what the allegations are. But Molly Hemingway is right. Matt Gaetz has a multitude of haters on both sides of the aisle, and, yeah, at the DOJ as well. He went after the DOJ constantly. So now it seems to me that this report, released just a day or so before Christmas, really, the release date is almost a signal that this report is meaningless and has no teeth. It's more like a smear campaign. Remember the smear campaigns that Nancy Pelosi talked about, the wrap-up smear?
Called the wrap-up smear. Mm-hmm. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press that this, and this, so they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic.
Well, yeah, it's a tactic that was effective in the case of Matt Gaetz. So now they've destroyed his political career. One of the big questions is, what is next for Matt Gaetz? Here's what he told America Fest over the weekend.
Many have asked which perch I will be fighting from next. And some of you throughout this conference have even given me a few suggestions. My fellow Floridians have asked me to eye the governor's mansion in Tallahassee. Maybe special counsel to go after the insider trading from my former colleagues in Congress. It seems I may not have had enough support in the United States Senate. Maybe I'll just run for Marco Rubio's vacant seat in the United States Senate and join some of those folks.
So he went on to say that he'll be joining, actually, One American News. It's a cable outlet. So, you know, it's going to be interesting. Like, if he is an investigative kind of a person, what would be fascinating is if he begins investigating what is really going on in Congress. And I'm just going to throw this out there. You remember what Thomas Massey said a while back? Millions of dollars being paid out dealing with accusations of sexual assault. Remember this?
You know, Congress has paid over $17 million in hush money for sexual misconduct inside of the offices in these buildings. What's more is that was taxpayer money, right? There may be some on this dais. I mean, I'm for turning loose all of these records. Who in here has had the taxpayer pay for their sexual misconduct charges the hush money? I bet there's some over there. There may be some over here. I don't know, but I do know it's taxpayer money, and I do know not a single penny of it has been turned in as a campaign finance expense. Is the FEC going to investigate the $17 million that Congress has paid to settle, behind closed doors these sexual misconduct allegations?
Yeah. Now, at the time, Massey was talking about allegations against Donald Trump when they were going after Donald Trump for the myriad accusations that they have thrown at the president-elect in the past. But Massey brings up a point. What about the $17 million fund that is going to deal with these kind of accusations in Congress? In other words, will the investigators be investigated under the new Congress? We'll have to wait and see what happens. By the way, one of the things I was speaking earlier about the Festivus report, courtesy of Rand Paul, and he is going after Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. And there's a lot of people that it is like people are going after Mike Johnson. They say that he should not be Speaker heading into the next congressional session. We'll have to see what happens with Johnson. There's people that are actually asking now President-elect Trump to step in. And they're asking President Trump that they don't want Mike Johnson as Speaker because he put the Republicans in an impossible position, bringing that original 1,500-page continuing resolution to the table, knowing that that was going to put Republicans in a terrible position. So that is all fodder for another day. Coming up, New York Times, I want to make sure I'm able to get through this. The New York Times has an incredible video out, and it really does personify how bad of shape the Democrat Party is in at the state level. Details straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Dan Mandis here on Red Eye Radio. So in the news the last couple of days and this morning as well is the comment made by Joe Manchin and others that basically the Democrats' brand is toxic and in the toilet. Well, there's a story out by the New York Times, of all places, and they put out a video. You can find it on my X feed at Dan Mandis Show. And they're talking about the migration. All of these people that are leaving blue states and they're going to red states, and there's a lot.
Some are drawn by new manufacturing jobs. Others are pulled by finance and tech hubs. But it's mostly teachers, police officers, dentists, people who just want a more affordable quality of life. People also move to blue states, of course, but in smaller numbers. In fact, over the last 20 years, 9 million more people migrated from blue to red than in the other direction. And Democrats, this is bad news for you.
Oh, yeah, 9 million. 9 million more people moved from blue to red than red to blue. And that is bad for Democrats because of, among other things, congressional representation.
Why? Because the size of a state's population determines how many electoral college votes it receives. The next national census takes place in 2030, and assuming the migration flows on this spreadsheet continue until then, look what happens. California loses 4 votes, New York loses 3, Illinois loses 2, and other blue states like Minnesota, Oregon, and Rhode Island all lose a vote. And they go, just like the people, to those red states. In total, this reallocation could cost Democrats 12 electoral college votes. And don't forget, this would be locked in for a decade until the next census.
Yeah, and the states that gain, Texas, Tennessee, Florida, and other red states. You can find that whole video on my X feed at Dan Mandis Show. Merry Christmas from all of us at Red Eye Radio.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.